Alright, so welcome back to another period correct benchmark, and today we're going to be testing Assassin's Creed 3 on the Core i7-3930K. This has been slightly overclocked to 4.2 gigahertz. Currently we have 32 gigabytes of DDR3 running at 1866. It's quad channel memory, and then also for the GPU we are using the GTX 680, the 2 gig version, and that's pretty much it. Alright, let's get right to the benchmarks. Alright, so as for graphical settings, there's really not a lot. This is the original Assassin's Creed 3 version. This is not the remake and also or the remastered, but we are going to be testing at 768p, 1080p, and then some 1440p. Anyway, so we'll be starting off with the very high setting for each of these options. There's really not a lot, and we'll test TXAA. We do have just a normal high, very high, and TXAA. All right, and I mean that's pretty much all the settings that you can select here. Now the game is locked to 120 frames per second. Okay, all right, future me, yeah, I did not notice that the CPU power was going this high, up to 140 watts, and the CPU temps hitting above 80C, meaning that the CPU clocks dropped down by 100 megahertz. So just keep an eye out for that. Sorry, I did not mention that in my video at all. And I did try and unlock it. Now, first off, there is actually an issue with it going over 60 frames per second, which is quite strange because out of the box, the original version allows you to run at 120 frames per second, whereas the remaster is locked to max of 63 frames per second. Very, very weird. But anyway, there are issues when running at higher frame rates than 60. Sometimes there's carts being pulled by horses. They actually kind of disappear. And also when during the initial sequence on the ship, we basically, if you start looking out over the ocean and you look back onto the ship, like the people hanging on to the ropes at the top of the masts, they start moving and they fall into the ocean, and the cargo on top of the ships, they start moving as well, or that starts moving as well. So at higher than 60 frames per second, the physics start to become very, very weird. I mean, there's really no evidence of that in this specific section, but it's very few and far between, but it does happen. All right, so here we are, 768p, everything's set to max, and we are getting 103 frames per second average. Like, it is a pretty decent experience. Yeah, a lot of NPCs, still not a lot of stuttering. There is some stuttering, but really not that detrimental. The lows aren't too horrible, with 0.1% lows sitting at 38 and a 1% lows sitting at 67. So from the average to the 1% lows, I'd say that is pretty decent. Now, this is one of my favorite Assassin's Creed games, and it's just, I think it's brilliant. I'm actually playing through it again, the original version, on this GTX 680. Okay, so that was 768p. We're not really going to get a lot of performance back by changing some of these settings here. So I think we'll have to go to 1080p, and then we'll start changing some settings. Okay, so maxed out 1080p, we are getting around 70-ish frames per second, depending on where we are. Some areas like the harbor here, the port, it's not as heavy as some of the sequences or some of the scenes inside the town, but around 60-ish frames per second maintained at all times is pretty much possible, yeah, at 1080p max settings. Now, the reason why I test certain resolutions, mainly 768p, 1080p, and 1440p, is just based on this chart that I found on Reddit. Thank you to the person who created it. But it's just showing you the popularity of certain resolutions at certain times based on the hardware. Steam hardware server. I can never say that. Okay, so over here we're still seeing just above 60, and like the lowest was 63, I believe. But there are some areas where it did drop below 60 for me using these exact same settings. Not a lot, but they are there. But we are, based on the metrics here, I'd say we are fully GPU limited. Just we're sitting with 100% GPU usage, well, 99%, and our GPU power is pretty much maxed out, right? GPU usage is not always 100% accurate, but combined with high power use, it gives a decent idea. Okay, so not terrible, yeah. And as I said, you'll lock this to 60 anyway because there's issues with with running at above 60 frames per second. So I'm just going to lower some settings here. First, I just want to change the anti-aliasing quality to very high. I want to see if we actually get a frame rate boost here. I actually don't think so. Right, we're still seeing 68, 69, nice, but really nothing much changed. So it's not going to make the world of difference. And it also, like, if you are struggling just below 60 frames per second, then changing the anti-aliasing, it can get you to just above 60 frames per second. Now, one thing that I don't understand is if I now tackle this guy, like, why are they trying to shoot me running? Like, I've got no idea. So anyway, let's just get some money here. And you can see now when the guards started jumping into action, we started seeing some stuttering issues there. And we dropped our GPU usage into the 90s, the low 90s at times. So a lot more load is being put on the CPU in certain areas, even with these settings. But still an average of 75, so a very decent experience. 1080p was considered quite high end at the time, 2012, and I mean you can kind of max out your settings on a 1080p monitor with a GTX 680 from 2012 as well. Okay, so that's well, we know that's not where I wanted to get. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'm gonna see what's the highest frame rate we can get here at 1080p. So I'm just gonna drop this down to high. So this would be your typical high setting, maybe. I don't know. There's no presets in this game. All right, and there we are at 120 frames per second. Okay, so you can see GPU usage is, I mean, we're sitting at 80% because if it was uncapped, we probably would have been able to max out our GPU as well. But 120 frames per second, I don't think we'll maintain this all of the time. Is it because I'm running? Do they just not like it when I'm running? I guess that's probably it, right? Now let me just get out of the way, yeah. So 120 still, 1% lows are still pretty decent as well. 83, 84 there. A really good experience this. I'm enjoying it. As I said, I'm playing through it again on this system. It's been quite a while since I last played it. So, alright, so just going to try and lose the cops here. 120 is definitely possible if you just drop a few settings at 1080p. Alright, so I think now I've maxed out the frame rate. Let's see what this GPU can do at 1440p. Alright, so here we are at 1440p. I'm gonna max out all the settings again, very high, whatever, and TXAA, whatnot. Let's see. I don't think 60 is gonna happen at all times. Yeah. Okay, so 1440p, and I'm unfortunately not able to lose the cops. Yeah. That was quite a jump. Okay, so we're in the mid 40s into the low 50s at times, and like the lows are definitely much closer to the averages here. There are still some stuttering issues every now and again. You can see the GPU power draw actually climb up to 190 watt at times, so like definitely a lot heavier on the GPU for obvious reasons. 60 frames per second consistently not going to happen here. And I mean, it's really not the end of the world. Not a lot of people had 1440p displays back then, and I mean, it's still a decent experience. And as I mentioned in all my previous videos, a lot of people actually capped the frame rate to, or were happy with a much lower frame rate, like 40 frames per second would be, can I please not do that, would be considered acceptable, right? So if you lock this to 40 frames per second, you'll get a decent experience. It'll maintain 40 at all times. The stuttering would be slightly less, and the game would look fantastic. Max settings at 1440p back in 2012. Stuff dreams are made of. Okay, so over here we're getting 60. Look at that. We're just getting 60, but we're getting 60 nonetheless. I'm just running. I'm running so that I can lose the cops, and I just want to reset my benchmark. All right, so lesson learned: do not try and catch thieves, those guys, okay, because apparently you get into trouble for chasing them. All right, so here we are. Nice 60. So let's see what we need to do to actually get 60 frames per second at 1440p. All right, I'm gonna drop all the settings one notch. So high texture quality we don't have to, because texture quality does not really impact performance unless you're running out of VRAM. So very high, whatever. Okay, let's see if we can maintain 60 frames per second now. Okay, so very interesting. We're locked to 60 now. Okay, and I think it's because of VSync, but there's no option for VSync in the options menu. Now, the reason why we were able to do 120 frames per second previously is because this GPU is capable of doing 1080p 120 as output, but 1440p is limited to 60 hertz. Okay, so we can't do 1440p 120 hertz as an option for display out, and therefore we are now being limited to 60 frames per second, which is strange, because I honestly thought the game was just locked to 120, but that's obviously the furthest that the system could go based on the display settings, right? And I know that there is a config file. I did disable VSync in the config file, but I don't think it works. Okay, because obviously we're stuck at 60. Although like we're not much above 60. Like over there we're sitting at 99% GPU usage. So I don't think we'd be probably 65, 66 at times, right? Maybe 70 in certain areas where GPU usage is lower, like here. But yeah, I think this is actually the better way to play it anyway, is to keep it locked to 60, because there's no issues with the physics, and the game still looks plenty good. Right now, there's no like temporal anti-aliasing. That only came later, so you can see that a window blinds or shutters pretty unstable. Now TX AA can help with that, because it is, based on what I can find, it is a temporal upscaler. It combines temporal, not an upscaler, sorry, a temporal anti-aliasing solution, and it combines MSAA with temporal anti-aliasing, which can make things a little bit more blurry, but it should eliminate some of the shimmering, and it'll overall just be a better anti-aliasing technique, right? But I do think that the very high preset, or the very high anti-aliasing we selected, now it does seem to be look a little bit clearer to me anyway. Now there's no cops around, so let me there. This is so weird. Like, is this guy not a real thief? Am I the thief? That'll be so funny. I'm under the impression that I'm actually catching thieves, but maybe I'm actually the thief, and that'll be so funny. Okay, anyway, so I think that's going to be it for this video. It's actually a great game. Unfortunately, you cannot buy this anymore. You cannot get this anymore. I did buy the remastered version, right? So I do try and support the devs for my videos, because I monetize these videos, and therefore I think it's just fair if the devs get their fair share as well. Not that I make a lot of money on these videos, like a few bucks here and there, but still, like, so I had to get an unofficial copy of the original, the non-remastered version, as it's abandonware, right? There's There's no other way you could get it. But at least I did buy the remastered version. Okay, so that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And as always, we hope to see you guys in the next one.